example. Is it image quality? Is it cost? Is it the company's reputation? Is it the warranty? Is it the compatibility with your software? These are all factors that go into it. You need to decide for yourself what's going to be best for your individual practice. You can make a very expensive mistake, and that's why I titled this the $50,000 mistake. We have clients who have done just that, who have gone out to dental shows and plunked $40,000, $50,000 on a digital pan set that didn't work with their software. They went out and bought all kinds of integration packages that didn't work with their old software. So you can make some dumb mistakes here, but really, at the end of the day, you need to decide what's going to be right for you. There's no best system out there when we're talking about software or digital x-rays or anything like that. You know, don't put the cart before the horse. We're going to get into this in a minute, but you don't want to be making the really expensive decisions until you've thought about the other stuff that goes into it. You don't necessarily want to go out and buy digital x-rays, for example, if your computers are 15 years old and running Unix or DOS or something like that. So make sure you do things in the right order, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And you know, in real estate, they always talk about the three most important things are location, location, location. For us, it's planning, planning, planning. As long as you've got basically a game plan or a treatment plan of how you're going to go about incorporating technology to become paperless, you really won't run into trouble. So to me, of all the slides that I have here, this is probably the most important one because it really outlines what I want to talk about this evening. How do you get from here to there? So I've pretty much narrowed it down to a 6-step process. First is the practice management software. To me, this is the glue that holds everything together. All of your other decisions on the computers, the networking, the image management, the third-party add-ons, all of that will be dictated by your choice of practice management software. So this is one you have to spend a little bit of time reviewing. And I'm not saying that if even if you've got a good system in place that you should throw it out. This is designed more for people who have older programs who are looking to change or for new practitioners, but you need to evaluate whether your software can handle you going chartless or paperless, and if not, maybe time to look for another option. Once you've chosen the practice management software, now we can start looking at image management software. Those would be the programs like third-party ones like XDR and Aptrix, or integrated solutions like the ones that you get from Kodak or Dentrix with Dexis or Eaglesoft and Schick. There's pros and cons of that. We'll touch on that a little bit this evening. We'll obviously go into a lot more detail in future webinars. Now that we've got the software in place, let's talk about designing the operatory. This is an often overlooked fact that offices ignore, but to me it's very critical. Where are we going to put the monitors? Are we going to do 1 monitor, 2 monitors? We've set up offices that have 3 or 4 monitors. What about the ergonomic locations of those monitors? What about where the keyboard and mouse are going to go? Those all have to be decided as well. Now that we've planned all of that out, now we can start adding the infrastructure, the computers. Is there a difference between the ones that would go in the operatory versus the non-operatory ones versus the server? Yes, we'll certainly talk about that this evening. And the next step would be the digital technologies, digital x-rays and our intraoral cameras and digital cameras. All that stuff has to be added. And unfortunately, a lot of practices that I work with, this is where they start. It's the digital technology. It's the stuff that as dentists we like to look at things that we can touch and feel and get a real sense for. But these are the things, as I said, if you don't start looking at the other steps first, you may run into trouble. Finally, we've got everything in place. We're a digital practice. We're chartless. We're paperless. Having a good backup protocol is unbelievably critical. We need to protect that data with antivirus and firewalls, and again, we'll touch on that a little bit today as well. So this is all pretty important stuff. So let's talk about choosing a practice management software program, because to me this is such a critical decision for most practices. You know, about 10 years ago, Gordon Christensen and Clinical Research Associates, they identified 208 different practice management software programs in use. And to me, that's a staggering number because we're thankfully nowhere near that number today. Probably closer to 40, and I would venture a guess that most of you haven't even heard of about 10 or 15 that are on that list. We can certainly thank some of the large dental supply companies for that. PracticeWorks bought out a bunch of products. Shine's integrated a lot into their fold as well. Right now in this country, there's probably 3 major ones. There's Kodak, which is PracticeWorks and SoftDent. You've got Eaglesoft and Dentrix. And those 3 will account for about 70% of the market. A question that I'm getting on a more frequent basis is what about Macs in the office? I'm not 100% sold on Macs. I love Macs, don't get me wrong. I think they're a great platform. The problem is that the choices when it comes to practice management software for the dental office is somewhat limited. Probably the best known one is Mac Practice DDS. There's a couple other ones that are out there. The choices for digital x-rays are somewhat limited. The good news with Macs is that since most of them have Intel processors, you can now run PC-based programs on there through something like a Boot Camp or VMware or Parallels or whatever. So if you happen to be a Mac lover, you want to have Macs in the office, it's certainly an option. It's not the one that we typically recommend, simply from the standpoint that if you're going to be running PC software and PC applications, why not get it on a PC, which is probably going to cost you less in the long run anyway. What you need to do when it comes to choosing the practice management software is to figure out what are the functions that are most important to you. There are certain things that we do on a regular basis with our software. And unfortunately, in my experience, dental practices use maybe 5% of what their practice management software can do, and I'm probably being generous. They use it for scheduling, that we use it for insurance estimation, running billing, maybe run the occasional monthly reports. So one thing that I recommend doing is that you really need to get a feel for the software. And if you go to a trade show, that's probably the worst place to do it. What we'd always recommend is either online or have a rep come into the office and say to the rep, listen, we're going to give you 2 hours. The second hour is yours to show us all the bells and whistles and all the doodads that make your program unique. But for that first hour, we want to see the nuts and bolts of the program. We want to see the stuff that we're going to use every day. So we're going to put an imaginary patient through the practice. We want to see, okay, they've called up for the first time. What's it like to get them into the software? Great. Now they're in. Let's pretend they showed up for that first visit. We want to see the chart, and we want to see the treatment plan. We want to be able to get them into the recall schedule. When you go through that, you're going to probably get a feel for one that just feels more intuitive to you than others. Again, there's really no right or wrong here or best system. They're all good. You're probably never going to get close to using all the features that the software has. So really take the time to do this. Of all the things that we're talking about when it comes to a paperless practice, I consider practice management software to be the most subjective. There really is no right or wrong here, and pretty much all of them out there have bells and whistles. And even ones that people would say, well, that's a cheap program. I mean, people oftentimes talk about one like Easy Dental, for example. Easy Dental has something like 20,000 users, so there's a lot of people who are very happy with a software like that. The other thing that we like to look for is integration with third-party modules. For example, some of them will have a button for care credit right inside the software so that you could click the button. Within 30 seconds or so, you'd get a feel for whether the patient can afford the treatment, and you can adjust your treatment plan based on that. So it's nice to have that type of feature. What are some of the ones that I'm currently recommending? There's a lot of good ones out there. The two that I recommend the most, the first one's Open Dental. Any of you who are active on Dental Town or have probably heard of this program. It was developed by a dentist, Jordan Sparks. Really nice piece of software, just showing you some of their typical screens that you would tend to see. Typical patient information screen up here. I'm showing you a scheduler screen as well. It has all the bells and whistles that you would typically expect to see with a full-featured practice management suite. One of the other things I really like about their program is the progress notes. They've also got really nice speedy charting. They were one of the first ones to do that. You always have the ability, if you want to be able to scan in documents as well. This is Open Dental. The thing that I find really attractive about the software, besides the fact that I think it's a really good program, is the cost. That you have no startup costs. You're looking at about $149 a month for the first year. Then it drops down to $99 a month after that. Really nice program. You can usually do the training in about 2 or 3 hours online. So certainly it would be an option for a lot of practices. The other one that we're really high on right now is Curve. You're going to be hearing more about these types of programs, whether it's in the dental field or non-dental, but web-based applications, in my mind, are really where the future is at. This is where we're heading for all software. If you want, you can kick and fight and try to avoid it, but I think this is going to be happening for pretty much all software. So why do I think that it makes sense for the dental community? You don't have to worry about having the latest and greatest version of the software loaded on there. Most offices that I go into, they're running, for example, we've got a lot of Dentrix offices that are still on version 11. And next to the computer is the box for G2, and the box for G3 is on top of that, and the box for G4 is on top of that. They tried to do an update, and it was just a nightmare, and they don't want to go through that again. You don't have to worry about that with web-based software because they do all the updates on their end. It's always available 24/7, 365 days a year. You've always got access to that information. Another really nice thing is that because it's all on somebody else's servers, you don't need to worry about backing up the data. It's all done on their end. They've got multiple redundant servers. It also means because you're just basically running the software in a web browser is that you really don't need a high-end server unless you're doing some imaging. You don't need expensive database software like SQL and other programs like that. Your hardware requirements can be lowered